So hello guys and welcome to I guess the third part is of my tutorial series, and I'm just going to show you how it can look. So this is going to be the final product. I kind of changed something. I added some lettering to the side with a Boolean modifier. I'm certain this is a Glock in real life, but I'm not calling it Glock for just for uniqueness reasons, I'd say, because there are already so many Glocks, so I just call it something like 19 automatic and 9x19. Also nice inscription on the chamber and the ejection port, and just a little made in Germany tag on the frame. So basically that's how it could look if you really set up your shaders nicely, and if you get a nice texture and everything. I've now added a second texture, so I've just taken this light metal texture, this shiny like stainless finish, and I've turned down the like not the saturation but the brightness of the texture, so it gets like a dark metal, like an not anodized but a blued finish. So I'm using this for dark metal pieces like the backplate or the sides and the chamber as well and the extractor. And I've set up my normal map quite nicely. So I'd say if you try to generate it online, your normal map, try to play around with the strength and level like sliders, because it's going to give you different results depending on what you choose. This looks quite accurate, so I'd say this would be like the perfect fit for this plastic polymer grippy rough texture. So it's got kind of coarse finish and rough edges, so that's what I'd say fits nicely. And yeah, of course, the light metal. If you don't like shiny stainless or chrome guns, you can always use the dark steel on this. So that would probably be like as if I just went and used this one. So that's what the dark steel slide would look like on the Glock. I hope I set everything up right. So yeah, gotta just turn the sheen up. Yeah, just gonna turn the clear coat up a little bit. So clear coat, I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of what those settings do. Clear coat is going to like give it a like a coating in some glossy finish. So it's basically as if you were that's kind of hard to explain, but it kind of coats it in some sort of gel or some liquid or some reflective substance, so that not the metal itself is reflective, but kind of only the surface of it. So it gives a nice metal finish, but you can also, as you see, kind of exaggerate it and then it looks kind of strange. So I'd say, yeah, that's okay, but I'd make definitely two different ones. So for those, I'd use the non-clear coated version for the sides. So this is going to be like a matte black finish, like a, I don't know how you'd call it, like blued. And this is going to be polished metal finish. You can change that up right as you wish, so you can also turn that glossy. I prefer like glossy guns, stainless and chrome, so I'd basically increase the reflectiveness. You can also turn it to half the setting, so it's not as persistent and not as annoying. And you can also play around with the sheen modifier. Sheen just gives it kind of a general reflection of the surrounding lights. So when you turn sheen completely off, it's only the texture color and the clear coat on it. This makes it appear darker, but if you turn sheen on, it kind of adapts itself to the environment lighting. So that's nice. I keep my gun like this. I don't know, I turn the polish on the chamber. I turn that down. From experience, I know that chambers usually, if the slide's polished and the chamber is not in the same finish, so not chrome, then I'd say that the chamber would not be polished in that instance, and the sides wouldn't be polished too. Same applies for the back plate, but that's already fine. Yes, so that would be one way to shade it. I could also, yeah, if I'm already at it, I could turn down the shine on the trigger. So yeah, that's kind of what I would expect from my Glock. Now turn back to the shading view. So if you want to, you can take a nice picture, you can render it. For rendering, you need to set up a camera view and all the different properties like lighting, base textures, background and all that. But in the shading viewport, you can basically see it, and you can also like change some settings to make it appear more realistic. So that's like kind of your cheap shading, your cheap rendering option right there. And that already looks quite good. So I'd usually keep it like that, but me personally, I prefer the metal slides or the polished stainless version. So that's what I'm gonna opt for, but you can choose whatever you desire. That's nice. And by the way, if you want to look for the exact settings I've used, I have in my shading tab actually turned on ambient occlusion. That plays a big role in making it look like realistic, because ambient occlusion in and on itself just gives a bit of shade to edges that are obstructed by other parts, so sunlight or environment light doesn't reach them, so it shades them, like the little crevice in here or the crevices in between the slide and the frame, and generally like off-light areas are going to be shaded properly. If I turn it off, you see everything's going to get like one strange illuminated finish, but you of course want to turn that off, so you enable ambient occlusion. Bloom is also going to be very important if you want your model to actually look nicely when sunlight's directly coming from the other side. So if you turn it on, as you see, you have this bloom effect that makes it look nice, but it's not necessarily all that realistic on a high setting, but I always like it because, yeah, it gives like this nice shine and makes it appear more connected to the scene. Screen space reflections, I've turned that on as well. As you see, that also does a great part apart from the ambient occlusion. So without anything, it's going to look a bit sad. So generally turn on the ambient occlusion. So that's going to shade the main crevices, as you see. And if you turn on screen space reflections, it's going to shade those little crevices and make them reflect what's on the other side of them. So it's not just shading them, it's actually making them reflect, for example, making this piece reflect the chamber, as you can see here, or making this piece down here reflect the extractor, like that. And also here you can see it quite nicely. This is going to reflect the sides, like that. That's adding a lot more realism. Motion blur, you don't need it because you don't have an animation, so it's not going to do anything. Of course, as you can see, it's going to calculate if you switch views, so it's gonna be a bit rough around the edges at first, but yeah, that's just because it needs to calculate all the light reflections and the shadows if you turn it, so you see those little texture inconsistencies up there, but that's usually gone in a second, as you see. So basically that's everything I would use. Down there I didn't change anything because I don't have hair, I don't have volumes really, and all that's quite unnecessary. So if you just want a nice model to show off to someone, use the normal shading tab and just, yeah, load it. So basically that was my very quick, I wouldn't even call it a tutorial, I just showed you my settings and how the final product could look. I just I feel like I needed to apologize because my tutorial wasn't of high enough quality, so I'm just going to show you that our result is actually looking nice. So you can turn a quite rough model, quite a low poly model into a nice shaded image or a nice shaded representation. So yeah, that's just to show off how it could look in Blender if you apply all the textures nicely and I mean you can even do it better than that. So that's not like the paramount uh, setting, and like the perfect rendition of it. I'd say it's just, yeah, kind of medium. That's what you could do, and it doesn't require all that much work. If I hadn't made the tutorial, so if I had just made this model on my own, I would have probably like spent an hour and a half maybe on it. But as I did the tutorial, of course I did everything in a slower pace, so you could basically watch it a little bit and kind of reconstruct what I was doing. But this is just like a mediocre rendition of a gun with some nice shading. That's basically it. So it's not the most excellent way of doing it. You'll have some different tools at your disposition if you decide to spend a little money, so you can, yeah, buy something like I think it's called, wait, what's the name again? I always forget it. A Substance Painter. And with that you can apply textures better and more realistically, and like paint better, because the normal texture paint mode in Blender is kind of a pain in the ass to use. So I really don't like it all that much. So yeah, I always just apply a nice texture. That makes it look kind of uniform, I know, but if you have enough detail, that kind of makes up for it, so that's not going to be as big of a problem. Yeah, so that's basically gonna be it. Just feel yourself inspired and try to replicate it, maybe try to do something else like a car, or I don't know, train, plane, I don't know, whatever you wanna do. You can even make a whole scene, but for that I'd recommend actually rendering it and not just viewing it through the shading tab. So yeah, that would basically be it. And yeah, goodbye and have a nice day.